Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving that was relaxing and was full of things to be thankful for. Hopefully you also thought about our founders. You thought about how this nation came about. The pilgrims that came across for that first Thanksgiving, starting those first colonies that would become states, that would become the United States. And maybe you also watched some of the new Ken Burns documentary, which is supposed to be the definitive miniseries documentary on the American Revolutionary War and the founders that started it. But is it really that accurate? So Ken Burns, obviously famous for making historical documentaries. He's been doing it for a very long time. And this American Revolutionary War miniseries on PBS has a star-studded cast. Tons of Oscar winners doing the voices and the narration. Beautiful cinematography. But the general thrust of the documentary, what they're trying to say about the founders, there's a couple things that I want to take issue with and then talk about some documents that refute these things. The first of these is an idea that the founders themselves were basically the backwoods boorish hicks. These were the guys who were not particularly well educated. They somehow overpowered their more knowledgeable, more principled, loyalist neighbors and started a bloody rebellion for their own benefit. And they just sort of came out on top at the end. And then the other idea is that after they had done that, after they had successfully fought for American independence, they created a constitution that they basically ripped off of the Iroquois. The Iroquois, apparently, according to the documentary, had been running a democracy for centuries, and that was what Benjamin Franklin stole the American Constitution from.
The Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy had created a union of their own that they called the Haudenosaunee, a democracy that had flourished for centuries.
Now, the Iroquois League is fascinating, and I want you guys to read up on that, preferably somewhere other than Wikipedia, because it is very interesting, and I think there are a lot of lessons to be taken from it. However, in many ways, it's the exact opposite of the American Constitution. It was a completely verbal, always in flux conversation between 6 different tribes. It was not an equal democracy. Bigger tribes, like the Mohawk, definitely carried more weight. The terms were constantly changing and fluid and organic. In many ways, it's what folks who make PBS documentaries think that the Constitution was meant to be. But the Constitution was made to be something that doesn't change, that isn't organic, that is a fixed reference point for a bunch of states who are collecting themselves together. And you don't have to take my word for this. All you have to do is actually read those documents for themselves. At T-Rex Arms, you may know that we have been republishing field manuals and reference handbooks for your education and edification. We've also been republishing historical documents. So this book called The Path of Liberty contains the founding documents of America and how we got here. And you don't even need to buy the book. If you just go to our website, there's a free PDF file of all of these historical documents, because it's very useful to have these things, not just to double check Ken Burns' work, but because these are important foundational documents for the nation that you live in. And if you're outside of the United States, these are important foundational documents that other Western democracies and republics have really leaned heavily on, even more heavily than on the Iroquois League and their verbal spoken kind of peace treaties. Now, I want to point out that Ken Burns is a fantastic filmmaker and storyteller. This is going to be a very powerful, moving documentary with some fantastic vocal work, some fantastic cinematography, and some fantastic storytelling in it. And I recommend that you go back and look at some of his previous stuff. He's got documentaries on the Civil War, that's the most famous. Baseball, he makes baseball interesting. There's a lot of things that he has covered over the years, but this is his biggest and most important topic, in my opinion. And he's handling it rather poorly. It would be easy to say that all you need for a Ken Burns documentary is some folksy fiddle music and panning slowly across historical photographs to make your point.
The Curtis P. 40 tomahawk was modeled after the Iroquois' favorite weapon,
All the skills that they had acquired in battle were now being taken by the white aircraft engineers.
But where Ken Burns really shines is in crafting the narrative. And this idea that Americans stole the Constitution from the native tribes that were there prior, this is a pretty simple, basic idea. I think it popped up in the 60s in a Rutledge book. It was much talked about in the 80s. It was completely debunked in the 90s. And now it's back in what is supposed to be the most influential documentary miniseries on this particular event. But I really want to dig a little deeper into this issue, or more importantly, I want you to dig a little more deeply into this issue, because where our founders were coming from is very, very different than pop culture would lead you to believe. They are on a path of liberty from the English common law through all of these different documents, all the way down to our founding federal documents. The Declaration of Independence makes the case that government needs to be limited and that kings are under the law. This is an idea that the founders did not come up with on their own. If you go back through history, you can see these things starting off in King Alfred's day, the Assize of Arms, the Magna Carta. All of these documents make the case that government must be limited, that individuals have inalienable rights, and those rights mean that they have responsibilities to keep tyrannical kings in check. And these are ideas that our founders got from their British forebears. So if you go back to, say, right before the American Revolution, in the 1770s. The 1690s, the King James II was deposed and replaced by the people, and there were documents explaining how this was done, and then the English Bill of Rights was passed to create limits, constitutional limits on the crown. If you go back to the 1650s, there was the English Civil War, in which the Puritans primarily and a whole bunch of people inside of Parliament and the British common people as well fought a war against a tyrannical King Charles I, removed him from office, put him on trial, and cut off his head. And then, of course, before that, you have the Magna Carta. You have the British barons standing up against King John, having him sign this document, the Magna Carta, and then fighting the barons' war against him over this idea that the government has limits. It has jurisdictional limits. Even a monarch that's the very head of an empire, the very head of a nation, has limits. He is bound by the law. All of these ideas have been worked on throughout British civilization, English civilization. These are Western civilization ideas that have been talked about through the Reformation and in other countries. I know when we think about kings being deposed by the people, your mind probably immediately goes to the French Revolution, where you just indiscriminately chop the heads off of the aristocrats until you get the kind of government that you want. But remember that that came after the American Revolution. The American founders were not inspired by that either. They were inspired by their own ancestors who had dealt with tyrannical kings before in the past. So as the American founders are dealing with George III, they are talking about James II. They are talking about Charles I. They are talking about some of these documents that have come before. Remember that the battles of Lexington and Concord happened well over a year before we had written the Declaration of Independence or ratified any of our constitutional positions as a new nation. The people of these towns were Englishmen. They understood their rights and their responsibilities under common law. These were the laws that governed them, but also the King of England. And that is why they were ready to fight back even against the agents of the king, even the army of the king, because they understood the laws that bound the colonies of England. And they're very well educated on these things. They're not just slave-owning farmers who are trying to get a better deal for themselves. If you read about some of the things that are in not just the Constitution and Declaration itself, but some of the prior documents that were worked on, if you read about some of the military resolutions in Virginia, if you read about some of the petitions to the House of Commons that they were publishing and sending to Parliament and to the King in the 1760s, if you read some of the sermons that were being preached in the 1750s, if you read about some of these ideas that were in the Confederation of the United Colonies of New England in the 1600s, if you read the Mayflower Compact, you see that there is a lot of connective tissue between these documents. These ideas about limited government, the rights and responsibilities of the people, come through very clearly, and they've been discussed in lots of other books. So in addition to this over at T-Rex Arms, we also have books like Vindicii contra Tyrannus. This was a book written by the French Huguenots when they were resisting their own tyrannical king. And John Adams said that this book right here is one of the key documents that inspired the Constitution. We also have Lex Rex, which is in English, The Law and the King, or The Law is the King. This was written by Samuel Rutherford during and around the time of that English Civil War against Charles I. These are big, heavy, substantial books that make big, heavy, substantial cases for what is right in these different countries. These are the things that our founders really leaned upon. And you can see that both in the ways that they quote these documents, the way that they talk about these documents, and all of this stuff is in the public record. Kind of the crazy thing to me is that what you're not supposed to know about the American founders, the secret knowledge about their influences and their desires, are not secret at all. They were not part of secret guilds or secret societies. These are the things that come across in their letters, in their speeches, the pamphlets that they published, the official communications with the Crown, with Parliament, things like that. That's where you find this stuff. Although what happens is we've kind of got this revisionist history going on. I guarantee that in the next 10 or 15 years, if this Ken Burns documentary is as influential as a Civil War documentary is as influential as people are hoping this PBC miniseries is, in 10 or 15 years, people will be saying not only did Benjamin Franklin steal the entire Constitution from the Iroquois tribes, he was an Iroquois himself.
Desperate for more ideas, Benjamin Franklin used a Nicolas Cage disguise in order to steal the Declaration of Independence from the Sioux Nation Archives building.
Pop culture is just going to kind of drive this narrative, and the stuff that used to be highly well-known, highly well-published, incredibly accessible, widely talked about, officially discussed, and the actual founding documents of our nation, this is going to be the secret knowledge that's actually not particularly well-known and not particularly easy to come by. So I want you to go to our website. This is a great book to own a physical hard copy of, and so are the others that are part of our resistance theory library, I am calling it. But there's also free PDFs there that you should download and have just for reference, so that you can, as you watch this stuff, see the conversations happening on social media, be better informed, understand these things better yourself. And if you're watching this video at roughly the time that it comes out, all this stuff is going to be on sale for our Black Friday discount season. So I highly recommend that you understand this stuff better than Ken Burns does. Now, I know that there are some people who are curious why we are publishing military handbooks and reference manuals, and also historical founding documents and important resistance theory books all at the same time. It's one of those things that make you go,